Welcome to Reach Church. I'm Marshall Fant, the Director of Church Consulting and Strategic Planning for Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. My purpose is to encourage pastors and church leaders as you refocus, renew, and revitalize your churches. We've established this podcast to offer practical tips and suggestions as you equip disciples to make disciples. Romans 1:16 says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek." And that's the topic of today's Rechurch. This is Marshall Fant. So glad to have you with us. And I want to introduce the Edwards family to you. Many of you know them. But Jonathan, introduce yourself and your wife to everybody, please.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Edwards. My wife, Chrissa. We've been married in a very short time for 50 years.
Wow. 50 years. Congratulations. Yeah.
It's been in the ministry almost all of that time. I just thought maybe my wife would like to share her testimony of and background, how she came to Christ, and then how we met each other, and so on.
Good.
So, Chris, why don't you go and share that?
Sure.
Okay. So I was raised in a home where it was my parents were Presbyterian, and we went to church maybe, 6 times a year total. And a little neighborhood girl invited me to vacation Bible school at a little Baptist church in the Portland, Oregon area. And I trusted Christ as my Savior at vacation Bible school and immediately wanted to be in church. I was baptized later that summer, and my parents started going to church with me. Eventually, that led to my dad being saved during my freshman year of college. And then he served as a missionary in Bangladesh for 20 years after that. And so the Lord blessed with just reaching children. And when I was between my junior and senior year of high school, I went to a camp and heard a message on Romans 12, 1 and 2. And I did that. I went out into the woods and just yielded myself to God and stood up from that log knowing that I was called into full-time service. And then later that year, John and I started dating, and rest is history.
That's great. Yeah, and I had not heard your testimony. Of course, I knew your parents many years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually how I met you. And then my first, I never will forget the first time I met Jonathan. He challenged us as we were trying to reach the LDS world. You may need to read the Book of Mormon in order to be able to have some credibility with the LDS world, and I took that seriously. And so, let me introduce Jonathan to everybody. A true American cowboy is what I always think of him. And they minister in the West, right? And so, Jonathan, tell everybody. All right, so here's where we're trying to go with this podcast. All right, so just as you heard, Chris's testimony for salvation, we believe Romans 1:16 is true, that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation.
Amen.
And as I've watched the Edwards testimony work out as pastors and church planters and in Utah, carving out new territory for Christ, when I thought about this, Jonathan, I thought about you and your wife, because really you found a way to intersect this message with the lives of people in Utah. And so that's the reason. So that's the context. So, Jonathan, as you introduce yourself, so pastors that are listening and deacons and families, I want you to understand the reason we're here is not because of anything good the Edwards have done or anything good any pastor does. It's taking the power of the gospel and intersecting lives. And Jonathan can put it this way, in the culture where God has placed you, right? So you were in a different culture where I pastored in South Carolina. All right, so if you would explain for our listeners who don't know you, just a little about where y'all have ministered over all these years, and give that background. Then we'll go from there, please.
Okay. It's interesting you're highlighting Romans 1:16 because it was a verse I was saved earlier, but just kind of bobbed along in my life. And I was a senior in high school. We had Dr. Charles Woodbridge at our church preaching through the book of Romans, a week of meetings. And the very first night, he preached on Romans 1:16. And the Lord used that verse in a powerful way in my life, because I realized that I had in a certain sense been ashamed of the gospel, and God just that was a landmark decision. That verse worked mightily in my heart to motivate me to spread the gospel in any way that God would choose. Went off and got education, and then at the end of our time in school.
So you grew up where, California? Did I remember that? Did you tell me
I
that?
did. I grew up. I was a beach guy. I grew up on the beach in California, and let me tell you, beach culture and Bob Jones Southern culture, they don't mix real well. The first year was a little rough to say the least, but God wanted me there, and he mercifully allowed me to finish there. I got a good education. I'm grateful for that. And senior year, a guy named Wally Higgins showed up on campus and talked about a newly founded mission board, Northwest Baptist Missions. And God just drew my heart to go visit him and talk to him a little bit. Started praying for him. In the midst of praying for him, God began to burden my heart for the West. California beach culture and Western culture aren't super compatible, but God, he equips you for whatever he calls you to. So we started out in Salt Lake City.
You went out as missionaries, correct?
We went out as missionaries.
Okay.
We joined Northwest Baptist Missions in 1975. We've been with them all this time. And we did an internship for a year with Harley Johnson in the Salt Lake area. Then we moved to the western part of the Salt Lake Valley and started Western Hills Baptist Church, which morphed into Grace Baptist Church. And so Grace is doing very well. Pastor is Matt Johnson. Sure. They have a Christian school, just a beautiful building. God's blessed that church. We moved from there to a rural area, Salina, a town of about 2,500 people, and founded and pastored that church for 13 and a half years. Then after that, there's a little interlude between these churches where we raised a little support and reported to churches. And then for the last 28 years, we've been in a little town of Marysville, a town of 400 people, not a place where you would typically go if you were going to start a church based on demographics. 400 people, it just doesn't seem like enough basis to start a church. But I'm very pleased to report that Marysville Baptist Church is now a self-supporting church and they have a brand new building. And we started in Marysville 28 years ago. There was only one church in the entire county. It was the LDS Church. And now there's one alternative. Good. And it's Marysville Baptist Church.
All right. So now can I park right there a minute?
Sure.
All right, so just so our people are aware. All right. So Marysville, so you really the last 28 years of your ministry you kind of spent in one area. Is that right?
Yes. And what's interesting is Salina is about an hour north of Marysville. So we were there for 13 and a half years and then 28 years in Marysville. So a cumulative time, about 40 years, but our shopping was all halfway between in a town called Richfield, a bigger town. And they have Walmart and they have Home Depot now. They didn't used to, but they do now. And Ace Hardware, and there's, auto parts and motels and restaurants and all the amenities
So, Krista, how far would you drive for groceries?
So we 30 miles.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it takes 30 minutes. And so people from like Atlanta, they say, man, that is just really 30 miles. I can't believe you drive that far. I said, it takes 30 minets. I said, how far can you drive in Atlanta in 30 minutes?
A mile.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. All right. So long-term, same general area. And again, I want to pick some of these facts out of you to set the stage for where we're going. So It's my understanding in Marysville is, again, a community of 400. But
yes.
Now, tell me where I'm wrong, but it's my understanding you had as many, but yours really was the only area where the Baptist church was larger than the LDS ward. Is that, or whatever they call that? Is that fair?
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be accurate. I would say they have more.
Okay, but it was close, right?
At one point, we were operating a boys ministry. We had a number of boys, at-risk boys, and at that time we had a pretty large, group of people meeting. But the church now, I'd say the Mormon church definitely has more people, but our buildings would be very similar in size. Actually, I think the Marysville Baptist facility is nicer than their facility. And we definitely have a better location. We're right on the highway, and they're kind of hidden off the beaten track. So the Lord just gifted us. We started the church in the old bar in town. We bought the only operating bar. Of course, we closed it down. And we debated about what to call the church. We thought maybe Living Water Baptist Church, get the spirit here instead of the spirits. Yeah. But we ended up naming it Marysville Baptist. But it is really a prominent landmark in the town. Everybody sees the church. Right. And grateful to the Lord for giving us that location and a beautiful building now, debt-free, by the way.
Amen. That's great. All right. So here's where we want to go. All right. So y'all have been one place or two churches for a long time. Yes. And so you've seen people come to Christ. You've seen Romans 1:16 being lived out. So kind of, Chris and Jonathan, what I want to ask you would be, how did you intentionally have your life intersect with those that were unbelievers? So you lived in one place, you saw people come into Christ, you saw them baptized, you saw them join the church. So I want you to, and again, every culture is different. And I know now, all right, so tell me, all right, first, let's start this way. So, Chris, I know you were a homemaker, right? All right, but I know.
Homemaker and a school teacher and a tutor.
Okay.
A lot of.
All right. So I was listing what I knew of Jonathan. I knew you did some kind of medical technician work, right?
Yep. We did back in Salina.
Okay. And you're a pilot.
I am.
And you also are a horse trainer. And I think you also are a farrier, right? Is that how you say it? Horseshoe guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, a horseshoe guy.
What's farrier? Okay. And then you're a pastor, and you also were an educator with the boys' home. So you brought that whole, between you and your wife, you were doing all these things. So tell me, this is who you are. And I know you did a lot of hunting trips and all that too. But tell me how you used the way God had wired the two of you, and Romans 1:16 living through you. What did you do to develop relationships and find those that God was drawing? If you can just run with that a little bit.
Okay. Just first of all, we moved to Marysville. The Lord miraculously enabled us to buy a pretty good sized ranch. It was 280 acres. Plus we had a large grazing allotment, a government grazing allotment attached to the ranch. So we had. All right, hold
on, Jonathan. What is a grazing allotment? I mean, you're talking to somebody from the east.
It's for grazing cattle, but it's on public land. It's on government land.
Okay, all right.
But it was attached to the ranch. So we had control over about 2,500 acres. And when you look at town, it's about this big, and when you look at our ranch, it's like this big on the edge of town. So people, we were the biggest shock the town ever had, or coming and starting a Baptist church. And but they had to kind of accept us because we had a pretty large land holding there. And it started out that way. I think they were a little resentful of us coming. But over time, and through making contact with people and showing that we genuinely had a concern for the people and for the community, Now we have been fully accepted by, I'd say most people, the majority of the people have fully accepted us. And we have had so many LDS people come visit our church services. I mean, it's just been unbelievable how many through the years, recent years in particular. But it has been because we built relationships with the people, and they began to realize we really do care about them. We care about the community. Some of the ways that we engaged in the community was Salina. I was involved with the EMS, and it was a great thing. It's kind of a job that nobody wants to do, but everybody appreciates.
Yeah,
people who do it. And the chief of police came to me and he said, "You need to run for city council. You'd be a great councilman." He said, "People here in this town really respect you." And I said, "Gordon," I said, "that wouldn't work." I said, "Half the people be mad at me, all the time." And I think it'd be easier to be the president of the United States than be on a council of a small town.
Yeah.
It's
especially as a pastor, right?
With the EMS, it's a win-win. Even if the people die, you're making a good effort and to save people's lives and to help them in time of need. And so that was an incredible in the community. I would keep the ambulance many times at our house. They would just allow me to use it, and I could go out on visitation with the ambulance. It's kind of funny, And I'd go visit people, and you could just about count it down when I'd pull into somebody's house. I'd be in their house, the telephone would ring, and somebody would say, "Is everything all right?" "No, I'm just a pastor here visiting, with the ambulance." But my wife made some great contacts in Salina by tutoring, particularly in the area of reading. She's a special ed reading specialist, and that opened up a lot of doors for people. I'll let her tell a little bit about that, and then particularly in Marysville, where she became a teacher there in the public school system.
And the Lord really, I think we just need to say, what is that in my hand? Just like Moses had to say, what is that in my hand? And God gives us each talents and abilities that we can use to connect with people.
Right.
Mine was teaching, and I was able to tutor some adult people, and that just really made a good impression, and they shared that with their friends. And then when we moved to Marysville, we were there for a while, and the children began to be out of the home. I prayed about a part-time job, basically, to have more contact with community members.
Sure.
I really wanted to get out of the house and get involved in the community. And so the Lord led me to apply for a position as an aide at the local elementary school, very small school, like 40 students. But I was an aide, and then the teacher asked me if I would take over the kindergarten, which I did. And then the district asked me if I would take over a new special ed position of both elementary schools in the district. And I had a car that I drove back and forth. And the last year I had 53 students in special ed in both schools, and was able to contact a lot of parents.
Sure.
Special ed teacher is a lot like an EMT, and whatever you do is greatly appreciated. And then I just loved the students so much, and they all wanted to be in special ed. They all asked me, "How can I get into special ed?" And the teachers said to me, "Those students just know that you love them."
That's right.
So I had a lot of opportunity to share Bible verses with them and little quotes, Christian quotes, and just pray for them. And just in my community there, but also with the parents when they would get a diagnosis for their child. I was just able to share the hope of Christ with them, and eternity will tell how far that went. But I know I still have a real good rapport with those people.
So, and going back to the longevity factor, a lot of the students that Krista had in kindergarten are now married and have families of their own, and we've been there so long. We know them as young adults now. So it's been a great thing.
So staying in one place as long as God possibly allows you, it does bring back a lot of fruit.
Yep.
All right. So go ahead.
I did some horseshoeing, and there's not many people, and horseshoers are kind of like people's hairdressers. They tell you everything. They stand out there and hold their horse and tell you everything. But they never met a Baptist preacher who would shoe horses. And I just had, I'd say half of my clients I had opportunity to give a full gospel presentation to. Wow. I got paid by the job and not by the hours, so I could take as long as I wanted and talking to people. So that was a great end. We find there's town functions that we can become involved with. Yeah. If there's funerals, we'll attend the funerals in town of people, we know. We'll go to those. So
the bottom line is your life became interwoven in the community.
Yes.
In every education, funerals, job, horses, everything became totally interwoven.
Well, the thing too about a small town where we live, everybody gets their mail at the post office. There's no mail delivery. You have to go get it at the post office. And you can see everybody in town if you just alter the time you go visit the post office, because everybody has a little set routine. They'll go at 9:05, and if you want to see that person, you just go at 9:05, and you just get to where if you want to talk to somebody in town, you just kind of alter your time going to the post office to get your mail.
All right, so let's segue into this. We have limited time and so much to talk about. All right, so again, this is no credit to you. It's a credit to our Lord and the Word of God.
Amen.
So Romans 1:16, you saw it lived out. I did not know it was such an important verse in your life, Jonathan. But as you're in a lot of churches now because you do traveling and you represent the mission. And right. In fact, right now you're in Alaska, right? So, so you live in Utah, but we're recording this and you're in Alaska. So thanks for getting up real early this morning. All right. Yeah. So my question would be this. So what would you say are some distractions or reasons that pastors and churches are not seeing people come to Christ, where Romans 1:16 is not being lived out? How would you advise a pastor that's not seeing the church is declining? They've not seen anyone come to Christ baptized in quite a while. And Chrissy, you feel free to chime in as well. But Jonathan, what advice, where would they start searching their hearts or their churches or the scriptures?
A day of prayer.
Okay, go ahead. I agree with that.
What we did in Marysvale was we just started seeing a dramatic increase of God's blessing. But once a month, we would have a day of prayer at the church.
Yeah.
And we had a couple that took that on as a ministry. And they would open up the church in the morning and take a break in the middle of the day. And then open it up in the evening as well for people that worked and could come in later. And it was like kind of pulling teeth to get people to participate. Mm-hmm. But it got to where it was just a constant flow of people coming in. It wasn't an organized thing. They just came in, and we had a special prayer sheet there for them. They would go either pray alone, or it'd be a husband and wife praying together, a family praying together. It was not an organized thing as a group. It'd just be people coming into the church building, finding a quiet place in the building, and praying together with their spouse or alone or with their family.
Now, did you do that?
So it started in 2006. We had no children in the church whatsoever. We had older people. Every time we met, it was the senior citizens group. And our youngest church attendee was 19 years old. And we just began to really pray for children and for families. And that's how we started our day of prayer, just asking God specifically for that. And today we have many, many children in the church, young families. We have children who were born while their parents lived and worked in the Marysville area. And the Lord just really honored that. But we saw a lot of changes. We saw the community open up to us and just a lot of good. Prayer is so powerful.
All right. So was your day of prayer, was it on a Saturday? Was it on a weekday, or did it vary? Weekday.
It was a weekday.
Okay.
It was Thursday usually. Yeah.
Okay. I think you hit it. Any church that has seen any kind of revitalization or major effort being made for the sake of the gospel, they would say the same thing you just said, some type of season of prayer, whether it be a prayer day, a week of prayer, a month of prayer. So, all right, so that's, you contribute. I mean, I would agree with you. So you pray and prepare, and that's where you start, right? You pray.
I told people that, yes, I understand that you can just stay home and pray, but to me, to make the effort to come down to the church, I think it's just, in essence, showing God that we as a corporate body are serious about wanting His blessing on our church.
Okay.
And we just saw a dramatic change in the church. We were just kind of holding our own, like a lot of churches, and really not seeing much happen. But when that really got underway, we started seeing an incredible increase. And so I think we just, we all know that prayer is effective and powerful, but we just don't do it. We don't do it. Yeah. And it's hard for all of us to just pray like we should.
Then too, we've really tried to reach out to our community and invite them to things that they can participate in. We one time had a big Western day with a huge grills going and food for the community. A lot of people came.
Tri-tip steak. Yeah,
and we had activities like hatchet throw and horse riding and things like that. And 200 people, I think, came. And
out of a town of 200, so we had half the town.
And the one man remarked to his friend, "These Baptists really do it right," So I think just inviting the community to things like that, it really makes an inroad with them. And our vacation Bible schools are a big hit, even with the Mormon kids. And then we've done.
All right. So here's what I'm saying. All right. So I see everything you're describing is the event based, right?
Yes.
But you were doing that personal side in order to feed that, right? So I mean, you were getting
and relationships come out of those days as because you have a conversation with a casual visitor, and then you get together with them later and follow up on it. But it's a big deal for Mormon people to come into a Baptist church.
Sure,
it's a big.
All right, so
we got a couple of unique things that I've been trying to promote this among guys to just help lift up their eyes, have a big vision for things. And I think you would maybe categorize us as people that have a vision. And I think teaching your people about the nature of God that we have, and why should we offend God by our small thinking? I think that's Romans 1:16. It's a powerful gospel, and we have a powerful God. The powerful God is behind the powerful gospel. And a couple of things that we have done that's been a little bit unique in Marysville is for 17 years now, the church has had a radio broadcast on secular stations, and we're on a pretty powerful AM talk radio station. Plus, we're on a country western station, FM station. And we're aired twice a day, 1 minute Bible message every day, every weekday of the month, different message. And I'll tell you what, that thing has just taken on a life of its own. It is the equivalent of passing out thousands of gospel tracts every day.
And how many years have you been doing that?
17 years.
All right. So
and we did it 15 years in Marysville. Then the church we helped out at for 2 years recently, they caught a vision for it, and they allowed me to do the same thing there for 2 years.
That was in Price.
Price, Utah. Yeah. All right. So I think
17 years, and I'll tell you what, it wasn't a lot of feedback in the early days, but now is virtually almost a contact of some sort, almost on a daily basis. Someone calls. People, I just run it. I can't go anywhere in town to go shopping. They just go, "Man, hear you on the radio, hear you on the radio, hear you on the radio." Good. And it's just, I try to focus on certain themes like the validity of the Bible, and you have to understand the culture in which we live there. People don't believe the Bible is necessarily translated accurately. So I really focus on that. I focus on who the true God of the Bible is. And then, of course, the bulk of the time is spent dealing with biblical salvation, something people in our area don't understand. Sure. But you just keep those themes before these people.
Sure.
And only eternity is going to reveal, how many, the thousands of people are affected every day. They hear it every day. And in fact, most recently, one of the head honchos at the radio station in Price, he told me, he said, we get a lot of calls here at the radio station about this broadcast, and people really appreciate it. So I think that, truth strikes a chord in their heart, and it's just every day they get to hear a different message. And I call myself kind of the revival of Paul Harvey. And I use kind of homespun something, maybe a current event or something going on, and then turn it to a biblical text and bring a biblical application to it. So it's been very effective. I'll let my wife tell about another thing that we did. Sending out a paper, a little gospel paper, once a quarter to our entire county, every home in our county, plus some homes outside of our county. She can tell about that.
So we called this paper The Voice in the Wilderness, being that he's John the Baptist. And so he would write an article, and then I was the editor of that, and pretty much included something for everyone. I had a Mom's Moments column. I had something for the kids, a little puzzle, like a word search of the names of all the people in the Bible or the books of the Bible, something like that. And we had our church schedule for the next 3 months, as well as a list of the services. And then alternated between what does the Bible say about, and just work my way through doctrines like what does the Bible say about God, the Father? What does the Bible say about heaven? And taught about some of those things. And then alternated, when I would finish that, go into the B and the A and the P and the T of Baptist. Yeah. What is a Baptist? Right. So that the people would know who we are and what we believe about the Bible. And we have people in the church in Marysville today saved and baptized because of that paper.
Amen.
So it was a real effective thing. We mailed it to every mailbox in the county, which was about 550 mailboxes. And then it was in the local newspaper. They had a way of segregating it into 2,000 papers that went to our area and the county near us. So some people got two. I know we got responses from as far away as 50 miles of people who had gotten that in their paper, probably accidentally by the paper. I don't know, but it really made an impact.
All right, so I think it is, because we got to wrap this up. So prayer, using the gift set God has given you to interact with the community. You cannot isolate you from your community and reach them, right? You've got to find ways to life touch life. And then Romans 1:16 is true, and you believed it, you preached it, you declared it.
Absolutely.
So any summaries you want to put on this? And again, I'll put Jonathan's email address in the show notes. And so any summary statements you want to put on it, so I mean, now you're a radio broadcaster. You're to add that to all you all were doing. But what I'm saying is, your lives were totally interwoven with the community.
Absolutely,
and that's a Baptist in the LDS world.
Quite frankly, there was a time in my life when I denigrated guys that would go to small towns.
Yeah,
I was a big city preacher, and God has a great sense of humor, and so he finally had us for 28 years in a town of 400 people, and God raised up a great work there. We call it the miracle of Marysville. Mm-hmm. It's all God's doing. We were just an instrument that He chose to use, and we were so pleased. And I think anybody coming into a small rural area, and it's fun to be in a small area because quite frankly, you'll develop as many relationships with people there as you will in a big city situation.
Yeah.
And so, just because it's a small area doesn't mean that you're going to have less opportunity. I think you get actually a more personal contact with the community and a small community, and you can be a big part of that community.
Yeah.
And so, but our ultimate objective is the gospel, and so we try to make everything go towards that. In one way or another. We're not just doing activities to be doing activities. They want to be gospel-oriented activities, and that's the only thing that's going to, really change a community. But we have seen the community of Marysville radically change, and I'm sure people in town, attribute it to different things, but I really attribute it to the gospel coming to town.
Amen. And I would even say this, Jonathan. I would say in a town of 400, it would be easier. It would be harder to be bold in your faith because everybody knows who you are. So the verse goes back, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. So I'm thinking in a smaller community where you and your wife are known as those Baptists, okay? So I just appreciate the word of God living through you. And I think that, again, it's all to God's glory. It's not for you, but it is. It's making known the gospel. And I think probably another podcast, but Jonathan, as we were talking, and just not making the gospel more complicated than it is, so it's so powerful. Okay, Edwards, thank you all so much. I hope you'd see you in a few weeks. Come back from Alaska, get back to Utah, and Lord willing, we'll see you soon. Okay.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. All right, God bless. Bye-bye.
You're listening to ReChurch, a podcast of Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. If you would like more information about our ministry or how we may assist you and your church, visit us at gfamissions.org/consulting.